Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a super serious, in-depth look at one of the most audacious, literally physics-defying feats in human history, physically splitting the Americas to connect two oceans. And to truly appreciate the sheer scale and, frankly, the madness of this endeavor, we are actually bringing this whole narrative to life, right here, using the highly sophisticated, incredibly elaborate medium of elbow macaroni noodle art. I know. It sounds a bit unexpected, but trust me, by the end of this, you're going to see how it perfectly captures the beautiful, chaotic mess of earth and engineering that is the Panama Canal.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp why anyone would even attempt to carve a 50-mile trench straight through impenetrable, disease-ridden jungle, we have to look at the global map. Before this canal existed, maritime trade was a complete geographical nightmare. If a ship needed to get from New York to San Francisco, it had to travel all the way down the entire South American continent and navigate the freezing, notoriously deadly waters of Cape Horn. We are talking about a treacherous 8,000-mile detour. Eliminating that journey wasn't just a matter of convenience, you know? It was the ultimate global puzzle. It was the key to dominating 20th century commerce and naval power.
Section 1. The French Sea Level Disaster.
Solving this ultimate impossible problem required a lot more than just ambition. It required serious respect for the land itself, a lesson learned the really hard way during the very first major attempts starting back in 1881. Look at these two totally different realities. Over on the left, you've got the Suez Canal, built by the famed French diplomat Ferdinand de Lesseps. It was a massive success, dug right through flat, sandy terrain, while de Lesseps, riding high on this victory, decided he was just going to repeat the feat in Panama. His fatal geographic mistake? He insisted on building a sea-level canal with absolutely no locks. But check out the wonderfully chaotic noodle art we've got for Panama here. This is not Egypt. Panama is dense jungle. It has torrential tropical rains, steep mountainous terrain, and the wildly unpredictable flooding Chagres River. De Lesseps tried to force a flat Earth solution onto a violently three-dimensional landscape.
And you know what? The Earth fought back, and the human cost was just utterly devastating. Equipment got destroyed by constant, relentless landslides, but the real enemy here was microscopic. Tropical diseases, specifically yellow fever and malaria, absolutely decimated the French workforce. So by 1889, the French effort had entirely collapsed into bankruptcy, and left behind in the mud were the graves of over 20,000 workers. It was a complete and total disaster.
Section 2. Securing the Canal Zone. If this canal was ever going to actually get built, the next attempt needed a radically different approach. It needed geopolitical force, biological warfare, and just unprecedented engineering. Let's start with the geopolitical maneuvering by the United States to actually secure the land. Jumping from that French collapse in 1889 to the pivotal year of 1903, the Isthmus of Panama was actually just a province of Colombia at this time. The U.S., under President Theodore Roosevelt, wanted to buy out the old French equipment and lease the land to build the canal. But the Colombian Senate rejected the treaty. In response, Roosevelt didn't just pack up and go home. Actually, scratch that. He did the exact opposite. He threw his backing behind a group of Panamanian separatists who wanted independence from Colombia. Which brings us to a textbook definition of what historians call gunboat diplomacy, using a massive display of naval power to achieve foreign policy goals. When the Panamanian Rebellion kicked off, the United States deployed its Navy warships right off the coast. This massive display of military might effectively blocked Colombian troops from ever arriving to suppress the rebellion. The result? Panama declared independence, and mere days later, the newly formed Panamanian government signed a treaty granting the U.S. perpetual control over a 10-mile-wide stretch of land, the Panama Canal Zone, for an initial payment of $10 million. Boom! The land was secured.
Section 3. Defeating the mosquito.
Having the land meant absolutely nothing if the workforce was just going to die from disease like the French did. The Americans had to conquer the biology of the jungle before they could even touch the geology. Enter Dr. William Gorgas. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the scientific mobilization it represents. Dr. Gorgas based his whole strategy on a huge breakthrough theory by Cuban scientist Dr. Carlos Finlay, which stated that mosquitoes were the actual transmitters of yellow fever and malaria. They weren't just a nuisance, they were the enemy. Gorgas launched this hyper-aggressive, almost militaristic public health campaign. Look at the steps: draining every single swamp they could find, aggressively fumigating buildings, and laying oil across any standing water to literally suffocate the mosquito larvae. It was meticulous, exhausting work, but it worked. By 1906, yellow fever was completely eradicated from the Canal Zone. The invisible enemy was defeated.
Section 4. Engineering the impossible.
With the death rate finally brought under control, the physical excavation could truly begin under the new chief engineer, John Frank Stevens. So the crucial point is that Stevens took one look at the landscape and immediately scrapped that old French sea level plan. He realized you just cannot fight the flooding Chagres River, you have to harness it. His brilliant solution was the high lake and lock system. Instead of digging down to sea level, workers dammed the river to create Gatun Lake, which at the time was the largest artificial lake in the entire world, sitting 85 feet above sea level. Ships would literally be lifted up to the lake using 3 sets of massive concrete gravity locks, and then lowered back down on the other side. And because it relied on that elevated lake, gravity alone moved the water in and out of the locks. No massive water pumps required. It was elegant, brilliant engineering.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what it took to make that vision a reality. We're stepping away from our macaroni art for a quick second to look at this stark, historical photograph from 1907. This is the Culebra Cut, a 9-mile trench carved directly through the mountainous Continental Divide. Look at the size of those steam shovels compared to the vast walls of earth towering around them. Thousands of workers had to excavate over 100 million cubic yards of earth in this section alone, and they had to do all of it while dealing with constant, sudden, and often fatal landslides. The earth was literally shifting and collapsing right back on top of them as they dug.
Section 5. The ultimate cost.
The sheer force of will required to finish this project is almost incomprehensible today. Let's look at the staggering statistical scale of the American construction phase, which spanned a grueling decade from 1904 to 1914. $375 million. Just let that number sink in for a moment. That was the initial financial cost to the United States government back then. When you adjust that for inflation, we're talking about an investment of roughly $11 billion today. That is a mind-numbing financial commitment to literally reshape the geography of the planet.
But honestly, the financial cost pales in comparison to the human effort and sacrifice. Look at these final numbers for the American phase. Peak labor force, over 50,000 workers. And it's absolutely crucial to note here that the vast majority of this grueling physical labor was done by black laborers recruited from the Caribbean. Despite all those amazing medical advancements, roughly 5,600 workers still died during the American construction, crushed by landslides or lost to terrible accidents. Together, they excavated roughly 240 million cubic yards of rock and dirt. Finally, on August 15, 1914, the steamship SS Encon made the very first official transit, officially opening the canal to the world.
Section 6. A geopolitical legacy.
The completion of the Panama Canal didn't just shorten trade routes, it fundamentally altered the entire balance of global power. Looking at the long-term impact of this 50-mile waterway, on the one hand, the canal provided incredible strategic military advantage to the United States. It allowed the creation of a true two-ocean navy. Warships could now move rapidly between the Atlantic and Pacific, a capability that proved absolutely essential for American military strategy during both World War I and World War II. However, this American control was a constant source of tension. Decades of geopolitical friction over sovereignty eventually led to the Torrijos-Carter treaties in 1977. These treaties set the stage for a peaceful transition, and on December 31, 1999, the United States officially transferred full control of the canal back to the nation of Panama.
We've explored the hubris of the early attempts, the cunning of the geopolitical maneuvers, and the blood, sweat, and brilliant engineering that finally split the land. But as we reflect on everything laid out in this explainer today, I want to leave you with this question. When we look at the unimaginable toll of the earth displaced, the billions of dollars spent, and the thousands upon thousands of lives lost in the mud and the rock, what is the true price of reshaping the modern world? It's a question of costs and rewards that echoes in every single massive human endeavor we attempt today. Thanks for joining me, and keep exploring.